surface beneath a starry sky, together. For a game from 1991 to even recognize that it could juxtapose a lonely, reflective moment with one of quiet compassion, to recognize the value in that, was a testament to how far ahead of its time Metroid 2 really was. Unconventional, forward-thinking, avant-garde, all of this would come to define the Metroid series. In Samus Returns, the tunnel before the Queen is lousy with dozens of enemies, all of which you've already fought dozens of times, so numerous that the thought of taking a breath would never even occur to you. No, there are upgrades to find, Aeon powers to use, obstacles to overcome. It's indistinguishable from the rest of the game. Heck, it's even reusing graphics. How about that last tunnel with the baby Metroid? The environment looks perfect. The music is perfect. But for some reason, the game still can't help but dump enemies all over the map. In a moment that should be so serene and reflective, you're still fighting the same old fight. This memorable moment that carried so much significance has been turned into a section of the map so ordinary that if I'd never played Metroid 2, I wouldn't have even thought to mention it. And given what Samus Returns is about to do, that is a damn thing. This should be the most tremendous, raucous, shocking moment in Samus Returns. And if the game had let you breathe, made you put your guard down, led you to believe that the fight was over, then it would have been. But instead, the actual build-up is, you fight through yet another horde of enemies while ill-fitting victory music plays, then walk by a set of totally inauspicious recharge points, then you step out into a world not under a starry night sky, but one blanketed by gloomy emerald thunderclouds as the music turns dark and sinister. So Ridley showing up doesn't land as any kind of surprise. It's more like, oh my, could it be? It is! Vince Russo has struck again! What a swerve! This exemplifies the difference between Return of Samus and Samus Returns. The remake introduces all kinds of new gameplay mechanics and modern flourishes, and for the most part, it pulls that stuff off with aplomb. But tonally, atmospherically, fundamentally, Samus Returns does not feel like Metroid 2. I go so far as to say that in moments like this, it has completely missed the point, as if the remake lacks understanding or reverence for what it's even a remake of. To put that another way, Samus Returns is not another Metroid 2 remake. I wanted to put as much distance as I could between myself and AN2R before I made this episode. I haven't touched it, I haven't watched my own episode about it, I've tried not to think about it, because I knew that if I was too hasty, I wouldn't be able to help but compare this officially licensed remake to that decade-plus labor of love, and it'd be hard to judge Nintendo's effort on its own merits. But when it comes to this time, this moment, this poignant epilogue, I have no choice but to compare AN2R, a remake that nailed it, to Samus Returns, a remake that did not. The dichotomy of these two completely different approaches to modernizing Metroid 2 is fascinating. My initial read on Metroid 2 was that of a swashbuckling action-adventure to take down the Metroids. My perspective was shaped by a lifelong love of games like that. It's what appealed to me about Metroid 2, so that's what I saw in it. I would be enlightened by some wonderful commenters, this one in particular, who pointed out that in all my excitement for happy fun times with video games, I had missed the tone the game was going for. Through that prism, Return of Samus was not a bombastic romp. It was a tension-filled adventure. You had wordlessly yet effectively communicated why executing this scourge seemed like such a necessity, all of which makes Samus's actions in the end all the more merciful. Of course, this is still a 1991 Game Boy game. It's open to interpretation, and I don't see anything wrong with appreciating it as both a challenging, exciting action game and a progressive example of subtextual storytelling. But AN2R seemed to strive for balance in those perspectives. It was reverential to its source material in a way that rarely rings true without the passion and devotion of fandom. While Samus Returns falls back on the same couple of repetitive enemies, AN2R incorporates so much more of the series' lore, especially elements from Fusion, for incredible fan service that fits. AN2R evolved Metroid 2 without losing sight of what made it special. Samus Returns, on the other hand, seems more in line with my initial read of the game. It is a far more action-packed and challenge-focused take on the 2D Metroid formula. While AM2R strives to represent all the best elements of what came before, Samus Returns strives for something new. And it should try something new. Remember what I said earlier? Unconventional, forward-thinking, avant-garde. Metroid games have always endeavored to be contemporary. In terms of its in-universe world-building and storytelling, in terms of mechanics and gameplay, nothing is nostalgic for its own sake. Isn't that why Metroid Prime was so revered? Retro studios ignored conventional wisdom and mixed a perspective associated with high-octane shooters with complexity and world-building of an adventure game. The result was a revolutionary title that seemed at least a generation ahead of its time. Super Metroid took the established framework of its predecessors and evolved those concepts further than perhaps any other game of its era. Fusion was willing to corrupt that formula and stand on its own. Zero Mission wasn't afraid to wonder, what if? What if the original Metroid had come out 18 years later than it actually did? The result didn't look the same, didn't feel the same, didn't play the same, was not tonally the same, but it was a worthy successor all the same. Samus Returns may be a remake, but it is not a throwback. Just like another game with Returns in the title, it is bold enough to try to make Metroid magic again. That'd be commendable in any age. Even more so when the series has been gone this long. Even more so at a time when pop culture is practically defined by nostalgia. Because here's the thing. For all I've said about how poorly Samus Returns represents the tone of the game that it's remaking, and what a disservice that does to its climactic moments and its final surprise, the actual gameplay of that fight is exceptional. If Diggernaut was a great example of a non-traditional Metroid boss fight, then Ridley, quite appropriately, is a modern take on the old school. I don't think he's ever felt so dangerous, so enraged, so unhinged. You have to be just as tenacious, dodging his attacks and returning fire, because a single misstep can wreck you. The arena itself is enormous, and given Samus's vertical maneuverability, you're both free to take to the skies to evade and fight. The battle progresses through 3 distinct phases, and as it goes on, Ridley's theme and his onslaught become more and more frenzied. The phases are split up with brutal, flashy cutscenes, depicting Samus getting waylaid by Ridley, only to be saved by the Metroid itself. From that point on, it starts actually helping her out in the fight, and that is such a perfect, heartwarming detail. I love this little guy more than ever, and I don't know how I'm ever going to play through Super again. Ridley's appearance even serves something of a narrative purpose, bridging the gap between his meta phase in the Prime Trilogy and his return to pure organics in Super, which, hey, finally canonizes the Prime Trilogy. Although, wait, crap, no. The power grip isn't listed in the upgrade menu, so, wait, looks like this one's non-canon too. For real though, this is my favorite Ridley fight, and maybe even my favorite overall boss fight in the entire Metroid series. Samus Returns definitely doesn't capture the same atmosphere of the game it's remaking, and it even misses the point of some of its most special moments. But there is more to Metroid than ambience. Challenge, combat, tension, release, gameplay. This is where Samus Returns focuses, and this is where it excels. I'm sure it helps, of course, and all of these things have a ton of overlap with what I personally like about video games. I can appreciate the atmosphere and the storytelling and all that, but I'm always here for the gameplay. Now, Samus Returns does stumble in places even on that front. Repetitive enemies, an uneven difficulty curve, complex controls, and a melee counter that, yes, could stand to be a little more interesting. Just like the original Metroid 2, it does a lot of new things, but comes out with a few rough edges. And just like Metroid 2, a sequel in this style could shore up every last one of them and then some. And man, I hope we get a sequel. And man, I hope it's not a remake. Come on, it's been 18 years since Metroid 4. It's way past time for Metroid 5. Whether AM2R or Samus Returns is the better game is of course a matter of opinion, and while I know which way I'm leaning, it's something I'll figure out when I finally play AM2R again. But struggling over which remake is better is quite frankly uninteresting to me. What I'm sure of is something more valuable. The worst thing Samus Returns could have been is a lesser version of the same thing. But Samus Returns is not another Metroid 2 remake, and it is not just another Metroid game. But that's exactly what has made this series what it is. It doesn't get any more Metroid than that. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please consider backing the Patreon or tipping me on PayPal if you're in a position to do so. Stay safe and best wishes to everyone. And until next season, you keep geeking, I'll keep critiquing.
So useful for the Emperor Volblacks, in fact, that you're likely going to have yellows in your party until the very end of Pikmin 1, whereas blue Pikmin are completely irrelevant the second you finish that very first bridge in the final trial. That's their last case use. From there, you can just put them back in their onions for reds and yellows. That's why, in Pikmin 1, reds are the best, yellows are middle, and blues, while still required, are, in my eyes, the worst. And that really sucks, because Pikmin 1 is easily the game that utilizes water Pikmin the most. Then came Pikmin 2, which has reds, yellows, and blues, with the addition of brand new purples and whites. Purple Pikmin... well, I don't think anyone is going to be arguing that they're the worst out of Pikmin 2 anytime soon. Then the white Pikmin, well, they have the fastest running speed in the game, are impervious to the new hazard Poison, can find and dig up hidden treasure, and will deal a lot of damage to enemies if eaten. So much damage, in fact. An enemy as big as the Creeping Chrysanthemum will instantly die by just ingesting one. White Pikmin have a lot of utility, and while faster running speed and being walking poison pellets might not be as good as, say, the blanket 1.5x damage multiplier Reds have, they're still a valuable asset to have on your team. Unlike Blues, they're still a Pikmin type that you'll want a part of your party, since they are still valuable outside of situations where they're required. Speaking of being required, in Pikmin 2 you can drain water, so once you do that, then you never need Blue Pikmin in that section that you drained ever again, making them even less useful. As for Yellow Pikmin, Pikmin 2 got rid of Bomb Rocks, but added Electricity, a hazard that will instantly kill Pikmin. Pikmin that aren't yellow, that is. People whine about this, but I always thought it was cool because it creates for a hazard you were actually scared of. It's easy to be pretty careless around water, fire, or poison hazards, but you see that electricity, and it's like, oh shit, I gotta keep my distance away from that. Whether insta-kill death is a decision you agree with or not, the invulnerability to the hazard makes Yellow Pikmin much better than Blues in Pikmin 2. Not to mention, because of their throw heights, Yellows come in clutch for many of the bosses in 2, whereas Blues excel at none of the Pikmin 2 bosses. Finally, there was Pikmin 3 that removed purples and whites from the campaign, and in their place added Rock Pikmin and Winged Pikmin. The existence of Winged Pikmin alone is enough to make Blues the worst type in Pikmin 3. While their design is dumb. I mean, these somehow look less like Pikmin than the Pikmin that is literally a rock. The amount of situations a flying Pikmin is useful makes up for that design. More notably, they can fly over water. And as long as something isn't completely submerged in water, Pinks can accomplish many tasks that once upon a time only Blues could do. You might think they would also invalidate Yellow Pikmin, but a lot of flying enemies, or enemies with an elevated weak point, are actually better with Yellows than they are with Pinks, since Yellows are twice as powerful as Pinks. Not to mention, especially with Pikmin 3's pointer controls and lock-on features, Yellow Pikmin, at least in terms of combat, might be the best they've ever been. Nintendo likely thought the same thing because Bomb Rocks return, but are not exclusively used by Yellows this time around. As for Rock and Red Pikmin, Rocks essentially replace Purples in terms of how they are utilized in combat. I mean, any Pikmin that can deplete a health bar this fast, not a bad Pikmin. Also, they cannot die by getting squashed, which is extremely helpful, especially if you play the versus mode as often as I do and hate that bullshit rock item. Then the Reds are Reds. Again, that 1.5 times strength multiplier has essentially carried them in every single Pikmin game. I almost forgot to mention that in Pikmin 3, they actually removed an ability from Blues. In Pikmin 1 and 2, they can save drowning Pikmin. However, in 3, they do not do this. Again, coupled with the introduction of Pinks, makes Blues kind of a joke. Pikmin 3 sort of adds a new ability for Blues, that is the ability to swim after enemies if you use the charge function. But this is truly only useful for water enemies that swim themselves, which when you consider at that that point, we're referring to enemies such as the puckering minnows, sputtlefish, and wogpoles. Enemies that die in just a couple of hits anyway. Yeah, swimming isn't as much as a selling point as you would think. With the exception of those 3 weak as hell swimming enemies. In no situation are blues the best Pikmin for any enemy in Pikmin 3. Only ever do they seem useful when an enemy is positioned in or around water, but water is an external factor. It has nothing to do with the enemy itself, and everything to do with the environment. In every situation, the second that Hermit Crawdad or Water Temple takes a step outside that water, blue Pikmin are no longer the optimal choice to kill them. And enemies in the water aren't a concern to you or your Pikmin anyway. If an enemy is in the water, but you can't get anywhere near the enemy anyways because of the water, then at that point, that enemy really isn't a concern to you. The only enemy designed around being in water that can still affect Pikmin outside the water is the Skeeter Skates. But even for those, blue Pikmin aren't the optimal choice to take care of them anyway, since they are above the water and have extremely low health anyways. Wings Pikmin are actually the best choice to handle these guys. Otherwise, with blue Pikmin, you're either forced trying to land blues on them while they're moving, or have to go into the water and charge them upwards, at which point there's still a delay because blues need to jump out and then grab onto them, versus just doing this with pinks. Ultimately, it all comes down to this. Blue Pikmin are nothing more than their case uses. If they weren't required for progression, there would be next to no reason to pull them out. Unlike every other single Pikmin type that has relevance even outside the requirements. Reds are stronger than average, yellows are great against flying, elevated, or long-range enemies, hold bombs in Pikmin 1, and are impervious to the most dangerous hazards in 2. Purples can stun enemies, have a 2x strength multiplier in 2, and count as 10 Pikmin when carrying objects. White Pikmin are the fastest and can poison enemies. Pinks can fly over most anything, making them the best type to carry that items through complicated terrain, and are the most automated since they don't need to be thrown. And Rock Pikmin can bash enemies when thrown to deal significant damage. Everything I just listed had nothing to do with progression. Those were all perks that validate said Pikmin types even when they aren't required. Granted, most everything mentioned was combat related, but besides combat being a large majority of the gameplay in Pikmin, the thing about enemies is that unlike ship pieces, treasures, or fruits, enemies respawn, so Pikmin with additional combat abilities are always going to be nice to have, even when they aren't necessarily required to progress. Pikmin that are nothing more than their required use cases are not very good Pikmin. Any fan of the series will tell you how good purples are in the second game. They're often touted as the best Pikmin type and could even be argued they're too OP. After all, they can do this. But when you break it down, they're only required for 3 out of 201 treasures. So they can't be that good, can they? Well, again, they can do this. So obviously they are. Purple Pikmin are good because even when you don't need them, you want them. Enemy staggering and carrying back heavy objects without exhausting large numbers of your army are too good of abilities to not want in your arsenal. It's no coincidence blues are the last type found in each game. Hell, that's half the reason they seem so good to begin with. A color like red, which is the first Pikmin you get, since you have them start to finish, you get a fair estimate of their usefulness. I'd argue that's why many players overlook them to begin with, despite how helpful 1.5x attack power really is. But blue Pikmin, even though I believe they're objectively the most underwhelming. I mean, it's why I made this video after all. In every Pikmin game, when you finally get them, any objectivity is overlooked because the only thing on your mind is, oh damn, now I can get that, and that, and that. As a player, any item you can't get sticks out like a sore thumb. When that item is just out of reach because you don't yet have the means required to get it, you remember that shit. Which is why, by the end of the game, it all builds up in your mind. It's not a matter of whether blue Pikmin are actually good or not. It's a matter of you noticing each and everything you can't do because you don't have blues yet. Blue Pikmin have rarely been anything more than a tool the game requires you to use. Like a key to your house that shocks you when you touch it. You wouldn't want that around, but you need it to get into your house. All this being said, Pikmin 4 presents the strongest case yet as to why these blue boys need a buff. Something else that defines them and gives them versatility. Because when what defines blue Pikmin can be ignored by pink Pikmin, ice Pikmin, and a dog, then what more are blue Pikmin besides the type you need for the couple of things that will be completely submerged in water? But hey, I didn't write all this down without a suggestion of my own. So what can we do to buff blue Pikmin? The lazy solution would be to add value to blue Pikmin through the game world itself. You know, more bodies of water, more enemies that use water as an attack. After all, a ton of water is why blue Pikmin specifically seem so good in Pikmin 1. But these things don't buff blue Pikmin as much as they handicap other Pikmin types. If we're gonna buff blue, levels. It shouldn't be at the expense of other Pikmin types. We can return their ability to save drowning Pikmin like we saw in 1 and 2. Not sure why that was removed in the first place, although even that is hardly enough. So when ruminating on what a buff for blue Pikmin would look like, I came up with this. Blue Pikmin are optimal underwater because they are the only Pikmin that can be underwater. But what about when they're out of water? When a blue Pikmin leaves a body of water, a water droplet would appear surrounding their head. This water droplet could serve multiple combat-oriented functions. Firstly, it would save them from one grab, pinch, or peck type attack. For example, if a swooping Snitchbug went to grab a droplet-covered Pikmin, his hand would slip, removing the blue Pikmin's water droplet, but also not grabbing such blue Pikmin. This functionality would essentially act as a one-time defense against certain enemies, until you traveled into another body of water. The second perk would be offensive ability. For that very first hit on an enemy, an attack with a water droplet would have 3 times the strength of a normal attack, but again, only for that first hit. With these two abilities combined, not only would blue Pikmin be good in bodies of water, but around bodies of water as well. Not to mention, this would add a plethora of decisions a player has to make. You can keep dipping your blues in water after each enemy encounter, but this would be at the cost of time. So it would be up to you if that time is worth it to buff your blues. If you're speedrunning, you might not want to keep doing this if bodies of water are too out of the way. This would also add options in versus modes. If you have a large army of blues, it's in your best interest to bait your opponent near water, where you will have the upper hand, even if your opponent doesn't get a single one of their Pikmin in that water. From this idea, there's lots of easy ways to balance it as well. Is this perk too good? Well, then make the water fall off after a set amount of time, or make the initial attack less powerful. Is the ability not good enough? Then make the bubble last for 2 or 3 hits, or make that initial hit more powerful. The advantage of an ability like this is that blue Pikmin would still be designed around the integration of water in your environment, giving blue Pikmin a unique perk without taking away from what defines them. I don't want any of this to come off as me being like,
I hate blue Pikmin. They suck, and if you like them, you suck too.
no. Did you see the title of the video? This is me saying blue Pikmin have the required use cases, but I want them to be more than that. I want them to have such a good perk attach that even when I don't need to go in water, I will still be like, I want them in my squad. That's just my idea, at least. It could so happen that Nintendo has an even better idea. The way I see it is that if they don't, and decide to do absolutely nothing to buff blues in the face of pinks, the new Ice Boys, and Dog, blue Pikmin might be the most irrelevant they've ever been. And I really don't want to see that happen. But only time will tell, because you can bet your ass I will be there on day 1 to check it out for myself. Here's to hoping we see Nintendo buff my blue boys, and here's to hoping for a great 4th installment in the franchise. That one doesn't count. Hey, thanks for watching. My cat recently passed away, so I wanted to use the end of the video to immortalize her. She was a good kitty. I'd like to give a special thanks to patrons such as Ken Jester, Some Crazy Idiot, Ian, David Marchese, Awesome Games, Ian Player 1500, Hazel TN, Drew Kellenberger, David Pacheco, Jeffrey B. Long, Victoria Mars, Amanda Goop, and Molly Batter. Again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, have a good one.
Oh, I got a Charizard! Aloha, my friends. That means hello. And goodbye. But right now I'm using the hello version. From the DS to the Wii U, Nintendo made an effort to release a new Super Mario Bros. Game on every one of their platforms. Every title has performed very well, so once upon a time, there was no reason to believe Nintendo would stop producing these games. But ever since they gave us the ability to create our own Mario levels way back on the Wii U, I've wondered if that would have an impact on their own official line of 2D Mario games. Would this product simply replace the new Super Mario Bros. Series? Why would we even need Nintendo to make their own Mario games anymore when we could just make our own, and there were infinite user levels at our fingertips? Well, the original Mario Maker was limited enough that, for a time, it didn't really act as a complete replacement. The tool set was fairly small, so there was only so much that could be done with it. But since then, things have changed dramatically. All has been quiet on the new Super Mario Bros. Front. Super Mario Maker 2 on the Switch gave us a wealth of new features and tools to create levels with, and now the most recent update has finally done it. The ability to create entire Mario campaigns has brought Mario Maker closer than ever to being that replacement. I've spent several years now wondering about 2D Mario's future, but World Maker is the straw that broke the speculative camel's back. Now, more than ever, I find myself on the verge of bafflement when I try to imagine what Nintendo's ultimate plan is for the plumber. So today I'd like to dig into this subject and try to picture a post-Super Mario Maker 2 world where Nintendo releases their own 2D Mario game. How can that possibly work anymore? Do they have something bigger planned? Well, aloha, my friends, because aloha also means let's talk about it. Not true at all. When the original New Super Mario Bros. Hit the DS in 2006, it felt like a pretty big deal. Nintendo hadn't released a traditional 2D Mario game since the early 90s. People fell right back into the formula and the game sold like gangbusters. However, even then, despite the new moniker, very little about the game was actually new. It introduced some very small modernizations, such as wall jumping, along with some new power-ups, and of course ported 3D character models instead of pixel sprites. But for the most part, it was still the same old Mario we were used to. And that seemed to be deliberate on Nintendo's part. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Nintendo loves making experiences that are familiar to anyone who's ever enjoyed their games. New Super Mario Bros. Was 2D Mario. Again, nothing more, nothing less. Later, New Super Mario Bros. Wii somewhat cleverly put a new spin on the formula without actually changing anything. It was still the same old Mario for one lone player, but now up to 4 people could play simultaneously. A multiplayer Mario game? Who's ever heard of such a thing? Seriously though, there was actually a time when this was a novel concept. It wasn't super exciting or anything, but hey, there were those sales again. It sold an absolute boatload, thanks in no small part to being a pack-in game with many Wii consoles. After that, the somewhat confusingly named New Super Mario Bros. 2 did it all over again. We got a game that had a few new features just to put on the box. It was all about coins. You could just get 1 trillion coins. They were everywhere, all over the place. But it didn't end up having any bearing on the gameplay, so again, this was another Mario game. Returns were a little lower, simply because it wasn't sold as a packing game to quite the same degree, but sales were still very, very high. Then finally, the Wii U launched with New Super Mario Bros. U. The game reviewed very well. Many people consider it a terrific Mario game. But personally, this is when Mario started to feel very stale. The game released very close to New Super Mario Bros. 2, and I was disappointed to learn that Mario's very first HD outing would be yet another 2D entry. And while none of the new series hooks thus far had been that exciting, they did feel like they each gave their respective games at least some sort of identity. But Boost Mode was a very minor feature, and the Acorn Suit was, well, no need to go too deep into it here. You can go watch my review on the game if you want the real lowdown. But the whole thing just felt like kind of a rushed job. It felt like Nintendo just needed to have a Mario game of some kind on their new system. And while the whole idea that people should be able to pick up a Mario game and immediately know what they were doing made sense, New Super Mario Bros. U displayed a shocking lack of creativity and originality. The whole nostalgia angle had worn thin. It felt like it was time for Mario to move forward in at least some way, because something else had happened since Mario got his new series. Retro Studios had started up their own new series. Donkey Kong Country got a new title along with a follow-up a few years into the Wii U's life, and, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, they were 2 of the most finely crafted 2D platformers ever created. Rich, detailed visuals, level design perfectly balancing cleverness and artfulness, tight, responsive controls, a wellspring of charm and creativity. They used the same basic concept of Donkey Kong Country and felt like a real return to the series, but they also introduced enough new mechanics and abilities that the concept felt fresh and modern. They did things that quite simply could not be done on SNES hardware. I never pass up an opportunity to bring up these games when talking about Mario, because they're a shining example of what happens when you allow a team of passionate developers to take an old property and make it as amazing as they can. And when I look at the New Super Mario Bros. Series, the Wii U one especially, I see what happens when developers are forced to take an existing property and keep it within a rigid set of guidelines, never evolving it more than a hair past the source material, and also when they must do this again and again and again. The New Super Mario Bros. Games were so regular that I was certain they would just keep coming with every new system. And you was so blah that I was certain Nintendo was purposefully holding the series back for the sake of preserving that precious nostalgia. But then, another something happened. Something that would forever change how we look at 2D Mario. Nintendo gave us Super Mario Maker. I doubt there are many Nintendo fans out there who have never dreamt of making their own Mario levels before this, and now, finally, this was our chance. Before it released, I kept thinking, there's no way Nintendo's going to make this a real level editor. I bet the levels will be super short, so the whole experience is really shallow. I mean, do they want Mario Maker to replace regular Mario? But then I got my hands on it, and I was shocked by how much potential it had. People instantly went to work stretching their creative muscles and making the most absurdly clever challenges you ever did see. I was amazed, and suddenly Mario's future was very unclear to me. How could they possibly make another ho-hum standard Mario game now that we've got access to a tool this powerful? Super Mario Maker broke the formula down to its building blocks. It showed us the process and put the hammer in our own hands. Wouldn't another new Super Mario Brothers game really fall flat after that? Even at that point, though, even though 2D Mario's future was in question, there was still the chance that Nintendo could do the same old again and have it work, at least somewhat. Because Super Mario Maker may have pulled back the curtain, as it were, but it still had a lot of limits. There were a huge number of Mario mechanics and concepts you simply couldn't recreate in Maker. I mean, it didn't even have slopes, for Pete's sake. So I thought, okay, maybe this is where Nintendo draws the line. Maybe as long as the next 2D Mario game is at least slightly more ambitious than New Super Mario Bros. U, 2D Mario can still coexist with Mario Maker. As long as Nintendo didn't make their level creation tool too powerful, they might be able to keep up the formula. So I waited for the next 2D Mario game to be announced, and it didn't come. I thought a new Super Mario Brothers would be a fine launch title for Nintendo's mysterious new NX system, but the Switch was revealed and it launched with no such title. Okay, well, they've got time, don't they? They could release one at any point in the Switch's life. But nope, instead, we got a port of New Super Mario Brothers U. Now, Wii U ports were nothing new at that point. They were a fine way for people to enjoy games they might have missed the first time around, yada yada. But this was something of a peculiar case. Did Nintendo not plan on making an exclusive new Super Mario Brothers game for the Switch? And I barely had time to ponder this because about 2 seconds after that release, Nintendo dropped this on us. Super Mario Maker 2 was officially coming. I had fully expected the Switch would get its own Mario Maker. It was much too lucrative an opportunity for Nintendo to pass up. But I still thought they would want to limit what we could do. So I expected a sequel that felt more like an enhanced port of the original, without too many extra features. What can I say? When it comes to Nintendo, I'm a pessimist, I'm sorry. Instead, they hit us with enough new tools and features to make our heads spin. And the result of this? People making levels infinitely more wacky and mind-bending and creative than anything we saw in the first game. Nintendo really went all out with Super Mario Maker 2. They went above and beyond what I expected from them. And because they did, the future of 2D Mario was foggier than ever. How? How could they possibly make another 2D Mario now? I spent many a night pondering this, imagining what they would have to do to differentiate a new title enough, imagining what would happen if they tried to make another lame new Super Mario Brothers game anyway, because they're Nintendo, and they do what they want. And I finally decided that, while I wouldn't personally think it was a very wise decision, Nintendo might still be able to get away with making another regular 2D title because of one single thing Mario Maker was still missing: the ability to string levels together to form campaigns. Because a good Mario game doesn't simply come down to the strength of its individual levels. Good game design is all about progression, pacing, introducing and developing mechanics over a period of time. And that was something that simply could not be done with Super Mario Maker 2. For all its power as a creation tool, it could never truly replace a traditional Mario. For that reason, I was certain, with the most certainty I could muster, that we would never get a world creation feature. Because why would Nintendo do that? How would that benefit them in the long run? It would break the formula down to its very DNA, to such a degree that any future 2D Mario game would have a very hard time existing with it. I mean, look at how Nintendo waited until immediately after New Super Mario Bros. U released on Switch to reveal Super Mario Maker 2. It's like they knew that Mario Maker would impact sales of a traditional game. They had to get you out, make their quick buck, then give us Mario Maker. So no, my friends, there was no way they would give up the one single thing traditional 2D Mario still had over Mario Maker. If they did give us a world feature, it would be like one single screen with only a handful of levels. They would give us a taste of the idea, but they wouldn't hand us the cake completely. And then, one evening in the month of April in the year of 2020, nearly a year after the release of Super Mario Maker 2, Nintendo casually dropped World Maker on us. The game's final major update would give us the ability to make our own campaigns of up to 8 different worlds and 40 levels. Essentially, they gave us those keys. Besides superfluous stuff like cutscenes and dialogue, they gave us the ability to create not only our own Mario levels, but our own Mario games. Mario Maker critics often cite the low percentage of more traditional Mario levels created by users, but I can't necessarily fault them for feeling the games are weaker because of that. I mean, they're right. When people could only make one level at a time, that did encourage a lot of really wacky and weird and extra challenging stuff. But now, at the time of this recording, I've yet to see the full results of Nintendo enabling this feature, but I can only imagine the designs will begin to even out, become a little more nuanced and restrained. People are no doubt going to start really planning out their campaigns, and no doubt at least some of these campaigns will ride on Mario's own. Not every Mario fan is also a good level designer, but this is a numbers game. Out of the 5 million people who own this game, soon to be more because of this update no doubt, we're going to see a very hefty amount of quality stuff. This update is what finally pushed me over the edge and spurred me to make this video. Because I'm at a bit of a loss right now. Now that we can make our own Mario games, how can 2D Mario keep being a thing? The new Super Mario Bros. Series in particular, how can it possibly continue to exist without seeming kind of bare bones, like too low a value proposition? It feels like it can't, at least not in the form that it's taken so far. But I know that Nintendo just not making new 2D Mario games anymore is simply not an option. Nintendo they straddle this weird line where they're artists in some cases and shameless businessmen in others. A new Pikmin or F-Zero or Metroid? Hey, you can't rush creativity. They'll happen when they happen. Everything has to line up just perfectly. And if we don't feel that the product is perfect, we're not doing it. Oh, but Mario Party? How about one every year? Money, 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 keep them coming. With Mario especially, they've shown that it don't gotta reinvent the wheel as long as it sells. 3D Mario is different. They treat those with a lot of reverence and care, but the new Super Mario Bros. Games have provided a whole lot of very easy money for Nintendo. And that's one thing that's weird about this. The new series was bringing in tens of millions of sales, and now Nintendo is willing to compromise that formula for what? 5 million sales of Super Mario Maker 2? Maybe a few million more by the end of the Switch's life? Why? What's their plan here? Because they've got to have a plan. 2D Mario ain't going away, it's much too lucrative, but if not, then what is it doing? The way I see it, there are 3 most likely outcomes. The first is that despite everything I've said here, despite what anyone thinks, despite what Super Mario Maker 2 does to the Mario formula, Nintendo just plain does it. They make another serviceable new Super Mario Bros. Game like it's no big deal. Nintendo doesn't like to do what we expect, so this is very much possible. Oh, they think after Mario Maker we can't possibly make another regular 2D Mario, huh? Think again. And you know what? If history is anything to go by, maybe it would even sell well. And this whole discussion will have been for nothing. Supporting this possibility, I once had very similar thoughts about 2D Zelda. Now that Nintendo's home console and handheld are one and the same, and now that that system has the biggest, most amazing Zelda ever on it, how can Nintendo go on making 2D Zeldas? How can they possibly sell something so small scale and simple when Breath of the Wild will always be sitting right there next to it? And would they have the nerve to sell both for the same price? And the answer was, yeah. How do they do it? They just kind of do it. They made a simple, short 2D Zelda and sold it for $60 right next to Breath of the Wild, and it still performed terrifically. So maybe the same could happen with Mario. However, in this case, there are 2 differences. One, Link's Awakening was a remake of an old game, and remakes always tend to do pretty well. We don't know if an original title in that style would have performed the same. 2, Link's Awakening is currently one of the only ways for us to get our 2D Zelda fix. Apart from the mildly amusing dungeon builder in that game, there's no full Zelda maker to make Link's Awakening feel obsolete. So while it's possible that a regular old new Super Mario Bros. Game could do well, just as Link's Awakening did, I'm not so sure. Maybe there are enough people that don't feel like digging through levels in Mario Maker and just want a traditional experience. Maybe not. From a creative standpoint, it feels like it would be conflicting and weird, but if the audience is there anyway, who am I to say it can't or shouldn't happen? The second likely outcome is that Nintendo doesn't retire 2D Mario forever, but it does place the series on the back burner for a while. I mean, really, this has already been happening in a way. New Super Mario Bros. U came out in 2012. It's been almost 8 years since then. Maybe Nintendo felt just as creatively burned by that game as I did, and now they want some time to think about 2D Mario and where it should go. Heck, maybe Mario Maker was their way of breathing new creative life into the series. Maybe they want to give us these tools just because they want to. They think it would be the best thing for Mario, and they're not even thinking about the future yet. Maybe they don't know where Mario will head next, but they just know he's not heading back the way he came. Porting the Wii U title to Switch certainly supports this idea. We haven't gotten a traditional game in a while, so why not give us another chance to play the most recent one? That certainly bought them a few years, especially when paired with Mario Maker. We could probably go several more years without a 2D Mario, and there would be relatively few complaints. But if any of these outcomes are true, I sincerely hope it's the third one. They gave us New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe to buy a little time, and they gave us Super Mario Maker 2 and World Maker because this was a way to deliver a terrific product and make millions of dreams come true, while also, in a sense, retiring the classic formula. All this because they are working on the next 2D Mario game, and it's the 2D Mario game many of us have been waiting for. I'm talking about something truly new, something creative, something exciting, something with new gameplay mechanics, something that can only be done on modern hardware, something that's more than just an amalgamation of elements from the old titles. A game that evolves Mario in the same way that the Return series evolved Donkey Kong, maybe even more so.
One Medical is the modern doctor's office for everybody in every lifestyle. Get 24/7 on-demand virtual care. Free 360 at offices nationwide. All from doctors you'll love. This is no ordinary doctor's office. This is One Medical. Click now to learn more.
Yeah, I know what this is starting to sound like. This sounds like a silly old monster getting his hopes up way too high. Expecting a major evolution of the Mario formula when Nintendo has specifically demonstrated a strong resistance to that idea might be a little silly. Again, they don't want Mario to be different. They want people who haven't played a Mario game since Super Mario 3 to be able to sit down with a Switch and instantly get what's up. And go, oh, I remember that guy. Oh, it's those dinosaur things. Yeah, childhood. The whole way through. But somehow, I still feel like a change makes sense. It's the long break after New Super Mario Bros. U and the subsequent re-release on the Switch. It's the constant attempt to give us the perfect Mario-making tool so that we never run out of our own levels to play. Something's gotta give here. There's got to be some sort of purpose to all this. Nintendo wants to always provide that classic Mario experience. Sure. But now, between Deluxe and Mario Maker, Switch owners already have it in spades.
Yeah. Oh, she keeps kind of moving around a little bit. Do you mind? Do you mind? No.
In there. My favorite, Nakatomi. After the tower in Die Hard. Works for a boy or a girl.
What's going on?
How'd you get all that money? By putting bad guys behind bars. I work for a living. Jeez. I emptied out my...
And look at that! Even more classic Mario games are on Nintendo Switch Online. And if Nintendo decides to remaster old New Super Mario Bros. Games and put them on Switch, there will be more classic Formula Mario than we know what to do with. And if the next system ends up being backwards compatible with Switch software, that means we would be set up with all that classic Mario for the next decade or more. In all of Mario's long and storied history, what would be a better time to finally break free from that formula and try something new? Nintendo might have dragged their feet before, but now they are paving the way for that to happen. Mario's their baby, and a host of decades-old legacy IPs, he's their #1 nostalgia cow. For the entire lives of millions of fans, Mario has always stood for a certain level of quality and familiar fun. There was no way they were going to risk compromising what he does for the company by throwing him into a game that strayed too far from the usual path. Changing Mario would be a long-term project, one that would take multiple releases and even more years to prepare for. And if any of this is true, it feels like we've reached the end stages of these preparations. Sure, I may be getting my hopes up to an unwise degree, but I think the next evolution of 2D Mario could be coming. Or at least I certainly hope it is. So that leads us to an obvious question. If Nintendo does decide to change the Mario formula, what might that look like? And honestly, I don't really know. Normally, I'm really good at taking pre-existing series and coming up with new ideas for them, but Mario has been Mario for so long that I'm having a hard time imagining anything different. Even an exciting new Mario has to stick to the old formula to some degree, or else it'll just be a new game entirely, and we don't want that. It still needs to be a Mario game. It just needs enough to make it feel fresh and fun all over again. It needs a new handful of ideas and mechanics to change up how it plays just enough. But even if I can't think of any specific gameplay ideas, I know what I want more than anything. Creativity. Again, I point to Donkey Kong. They just spent so much time imagining not only what would be fun to play, but also what would look amazing, what would surprise us, what would empower us, what would would make us feel something when we played it. One thing about DK is that he's much more grounded in reality, and that's what I love about the stages in his games. Mario lives in a much more surreal, undefined world. We've already seen some cool, surreal imagery in Mario's games, particularly in Super Mario Odyssey and some of the Paper Mario games. Let's see those kinds of ideas applied to 2D Mario. Let's see all sorts of weird and interesting environments. Let's see enemy types Mario has never experienced before. Heck, even if they don't serve any real purpose, let's see some NPCs just to help make the world feel a little more substantial. The 3D games handle all this very well. Even in the very linear Super Mario Galaxy 2, we still have bizarre locales and characters and some tiny semblance of a story. And yeah, you knew this was coming. 2D Mario is the very last place Nintendo will ever put a story. But I must be true to myself and suggest it anyway. I think it would be cool if a new Mario game had at least some sort of story. Or you know what, even if it's still the same old, someone took Peach and now you gotta get to the end stuff, even the smallest of additional details would go a long way here. Again, look at the 3D games. Odyssey tells a pretty traditional story when you really break it down, but there's enough stuff in there to keep it fresh. If Nintendo really wanted to make a new Mario feel fresh without really adding that much of a story, they should just use some new villains. You probably already know I'm big on the idea of Nintendo changing up their villains every once in a while. Bowser ain't going anywhere. He can even still be in the game, and he can be the villain in the next one. But if this is really going to be a new Mario experience and launch the mustachioed plumber into a new era of 2D platforming, give some other baddie a chance. It would communicate, this ain't your dad's Mario. This is something new, something interesting, something unpredictable. Even if Nintendo didn't end up revolutionizing the gameplay in any major way, and it was still just Mario running around and stomping on Goombas and kicking Koopa shells and eating mushrooms, an injection of creativity and visual interest would go a long way toward making 2D Mario feel truly modern for the first time since the 90s. Aloha! Except now it's time for the goodbye version. Aloha also means thank you so much for watching this video. Is Nintendo preparing to give us a 2D Mario game for the ages? Or am I looking too deep into this, seeing patterns that simply aren't there? Do you think Mario is in desperate need of a change? Or is comfortable familiarity exactly what you love most about him? Let me know down in the comments, and you have yourself a wonderful, wonderful day! Yep. Aloha means all that. Hawaiian is a very beautiful and complicated language.
G'day. I didn't know if I was going to talk about this or not because it happened back in January. There was a little bit of drama.
You have plenty of time any minute to know about the exact product you purchased. And then turn around and spend hours on it and just
My Pokemon Scarlet and Violet review, and it was one of the weirdest things that happened. Somebody, and I'm not gonna say who, made a whole video breaking down why they were very wrong. They were wrong about a lot of stuff, but why I shouldn't make a bad review about that game. And it was a really, really, really bad take, and I had no idea that video had even been made. I didn't know it existed. But then a pretty large YouTube channel called The Act Man actually covered the review of my review and defended me. And not so much me as a person, but more just the concept of what I was doing, you know, reviewing games, and why wouldn't or shouldn't I be allowed to do that. And then in a form of Inception, where now we're going to be reacting to somebody reacting to the reaction of something that happened about me, Asmongold actually watched on stream Ackman's video, watching we're like 4 or 5 layers deep, and there was a lot of things said about me that even these two wonderful gentlemen who had a lot of nice things to say about the concept of reviewing things in general don't know about me or the review. This is why I guess I'm not allowed to review games anymore, or why I won't be reviewing games ever again, because it's a silly thing to do, isn't it, really? To just go online and talk about something I haven't made, either positively or badly, you know? I mean, I can't imagine anybody making a career off of that, or that being useful to people at all online, you know? reviewing products to tell people if they're worth buying or not.
And now I'm in my kitchen, which for you guys means one of two things. Option A, I'm about to give away 3 Nintendo Switches on the channel. Option B, it's a sponsored video. It's one or the other. Factor, baby!
I thought you were gonna say there were switches in there.
There could be. There's not. There's actually delicious chef-prepared meals in here that only take about 2 minutes to cook. In fact, you know what? Let's cook one while I'm here talking about cooking them. Let me get these delicious smoothies out of the way too. Shredded chicken taco bowl. You know, I just worked out. That sounds pretty good to me. Get a knife? That's not a knife. But while that's cooking, it gives me 2 minutes to tell you everything I love about Factor. Factor makes meeting your nutritional goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. And then I brought it inside, put it in the microwave, and I get to eat in 2 minutes. It's so convenient, fast, and fresh. And I don't even have to worry about what I'm cooking today. Isn't that right, Deacon? I should get to eat some too. She loves Factor. She'll eat anything, actually. She's a trash dumpster. I wouldn't take her word for it. For me, I like that it's helping me hit my goals. I wanted to get healthier, get back in the gym. I get the calorie smart option. There's also keto and chef's choice, veggie and vegan. And I just realized it's too late. They cook way too quick. I cooked the sour cream. Look. I'm making a video. So, if you want to grab some delicious Factor meals, which you really should, head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code BEATEMUP50 to get 50% off your first box. What do you think? She loves it! She loves it! And you'll love it too. Click the link down below, BeatEmUp50. I'm gonna go back to the video. Thank you, bye.
Let's dive on in and watch. If you don't know who these two people are, so this is Asmongold down here, and then this is, I believe, the Ackman. I'm actually not too familiar with that. Or I believe that's the good guy. I believe that's the good guy. There's a bad guy somewhere in here, and I think that's the good guy.
Pokemon Scarlet and Violet criticism makes money.
There are still a large number of people that are shitting on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and the Nintendo Switch in general.
Yeah. Alright, I immediately need to pause. Because whoever's making this video, I don't think they know who I am at all. The way they said crapping on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and the Switch in general, hey, not me, my guy. There are Joy-Cons in my logo. I love the Nintendo Switch. I didn't make my review of this game just to crap on how bad it looks because the Switch is underpowered. I even had a whole segment in the video that you clearly didn't watch or get to or care to research before you made your crummy video talking about how it's not the Switch's fault. I compared several games like Xenoblade and Monster Hunter Rise as shining examples of fantastic games that look incredible on the console, and this is purely a Game Freak problem. And it is a problem. And there was so much to be said. I made like a half-hour video because there was so much to be said about this game looking and playing the way it does when we have so many other great games on a console that can handle better. Okay? Okay.
Yeah, I know. Believe it or not, pretty crazy that they're milking the hell out of it.
Also, Urcha, wonderful human being. I mean, Urcha Gamer she's why drag of all the people? There's so many large Switch channels that you could take a shot at, and here we have someone out there doing their best, they're not doing anything bad. Why pull that channel of all channels? Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Somebody's a little jealous. Somebody's a little envious of success. I think is the issue here.
But hey, content's content.
Content's content. Yeah, it's YouTube, man. Something bad? Hey, look, that thing's bad. Here's my video on it. Something's awesome? Hey, that thing's awesome. Here's my video on it. Yeah, we make videos.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like that says it all. That's just what we're doing here. We're just making videos. I'm just making videos about things that I like or don't like. And I want to also say that I didn't just make a video saying this game is bad and rant about it for 10 minutes. Not that there's anything wrong with that content, but I edited that thing to crap. I filmed it in a way that I thought was unique and entertaining. I had skits. I had a song at the end of the video. Like, I'm trying to create content, some fun, entertaining content around the concepts of, well, this game actually kind of sucks, and doing something special with it. Whoever it is reacting to my video, saying that my video is bad, you realize you're doing the same thing, right? You are reviewing my review. You're doing exactly the same thing. And I want to ask you, where was your song at the end of the video?
These social media influencers, these YouTubers, they have no merit. They have no ground.
No merit, no ground. I showed the gameplay of Scarlet and Violet. I think it speaks for itself.
Okay, so now Ackman is here defending himself, because I assume he's also made a video on this game and how bad it is. But his point stands for me too, you know? All I was doing is showing the game for what it was and talking about it. I don't need merit to do that one. You know, the game itself has all the merit it needs to show itself being bad. But as far as merit, who has merit then? Who, in terms of video game reviews, who has merit over anybody?
Gone out and played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet after knowing it was a massive glitchy mess, knowingly paid $60 for this game, and then turned around and spent hours on a review just to... They weren't sent a free copy, they weren't sent a copy ahead of time.
People that get pre-copies don't on games like that.
Oh my god. They did make... That guy right there, that Ackman guy? Woo! He did make a lot of good points. I don't understand this logic at all. I don't understand this logic at all. So the person making this video is trying to say, you can only talk negatively about a game and crap on it if you got it for free. If you got it for a review copy. You only have the right to talk badly about it if it was given to you. But if you paid for it, if you actually spent money on it, and you have the full experience that everybody else is going to have of going to GameStop and spending money on it and buying in to experience it, that's when you can talk bad about it. Because you knew when you bought it that it was going to be bad, and you paid for it, so you can't have a bad thing to say. I would argue that when you get something for free, it tastes a little sweeter. You know what I mean?
What? So you're upset that people are making bad reviews in games like a month or two after it came out. Well,
I love how people gatekeep being able to do a review of a game.
Yeah. Also, I love that doing a video on the game a month or two later somehow devalues its merit again. Right? Like, it's been a month or two, we all know it's bad, you can't make the video now. No, the reason why my video took a month to come out is because I played the game for like 90 hours before I even started writing my review. And again, if you watch it, there was a music song, I made a song. That took a week in itself to make the song, to make the video more entertaining, to give it more value and make it more fun, and make light of a kind of crappy situation.
As if somebody that plays the game, and a lot of people, this guy gives a review, and everybody else is like, yeah. And this is somehow, like, not relevant or not reasonable? Like, what do you mean?
Genius. Not everybody puts out a video in one day, okay? Sometimes it takes time. Maybe I don't want to...
I just said that.
Individuals who will literally go out, buy the game, just to make content on it because it's trendy.
What?
You're showing me while you say that. That people will go out and buy the game just to make content on it? Again, look at my channel, my guy. Not brag. I feel like defending myself leads to what is brag adjacent, but I'm not allowed to spend time on Twitch channel. I'm going to review the new Pokemon games, you know? Also, I like how you're saying that I'm doing it just for clicks, while showing my video, showcasing some of the worst parts the game has to offer. How are you defending the game at this point of all points? I would stop using my videos for your evidence while you're prattling on, because it's not doing you any favors. I would just go grab your own gameplay of the game in places that maybe look a little nicer.
What do you gain by spending $60 on a game a month later after the game is released? What do you gain? Views you gain?
Okay, I bought the game on launch. I didn't buy it a month later. It just takes a while to make a review like I made. You know. Have you ever tried to make a song? I keep going back to that. You tried? It's not easy.
content. Why would you make a video, a review? Why would you give a company $60 of your hard-earned money? Why would you spend $250 to $300?
Is this guy?
Yes, whatever you're about to say, Asmund, yes, he is. He is that. Whatever you're about to say, he is that.
Is he just now learning about how reviews work?
Yes.
Why would you make a video, a review? Why would you give a company $60 of your hard-earned money?
Why would I spend $60 on a game, give Pokemon Company my hard-earned money, and then turn around and review it badly? Here's why. I needed the game to play it.
$60 of your hard-earned money.
Also, it is hard-earned money, but it's also my job, so I pay them taxes. It's not a big deal. No.
We know, one, it's extremely underpowered.
Why would I spend money on a game console? Because
It's where the games are.
because I bought it 5 years ago.
You bet.
Both are good points, actually. Both make very good points there. Yeah, because I bought it 5 years ago. Because it's where the games are. I didn't go out and buy a Switch when Pokemon Scarlet and Violet launched, and then went, ugh, the Switch kind of sucks. The Switch is awesome. The Switch can do a lot better than Scarlet and Violet.
Because I bought it 5 years ago.
You've had plenty of time in advance to know about the exact product you're purchasing. You still
This guy, weirdly, is not only attacking a video game review, like as a concept, reviewing video games badly at all as a concept. I guess he only wants good reviews. He only ever wants to see good reviews for any video game and doesn't understand why on God's green earth anyone would make a bad video game. But he's also defending this game by saying, yeah, the Switch is underpowered. What did you expect? This game's actually sick and awesome, considering how underpowered the Switch is. No, this is actually great. There's nothing wrong with this game. This game's mwah, because what do you expect on the Switch? Again, not doing any research to find out or discover for themselves that this isn't what the Switch is capable of, and it can do so much more. Ironically, if they had watched my review that they're complaining I shouldn't have made, they would have learned all of this. See how that's ironic? You see how you actually kind of needed my video, but you're laughing about why I even made it when you were probably my target demographic?
do it all. You do all of it. And then turn around and spend hours on a review.
Why did I spend money on a game to review it? Because I'm not gonna steal it. Well, folks, it's been an interesting year, hasn't it?
So I'm not trying to be facetious when I say I didn't know who Ackman was before this, but they seem awesome. And Asmongold had some really good takes here too, just reacting to the same thing that we're reacting to here, this horrible take by somebody who I don't even know who it is. But I thought it was interesting that my video ended up causing such discourse to the point where it had two large creators having to react to somebody's bad taste. I don't know why people can't separate, the things they love or nostalgia from their own personal bias, and why they feel so, I don't know what the word is, so insecure, I guess, about the fact that a thing they love maybe isn't the best. Alright, that's it. I just wanted to take a look at this. I thought it was interesting and I thought you guys would get a kick out of it. Honestly, I forgot about it until recently. It's not something that's affecting me, and I'm definitely not going to stop reviewing games. I'm not going to stop that's silly. In fact, I'm working on another eShop video right now with 10 more games in it. So I have like 10 more reviews down the pipeline. Don't worry. I love what I do here on this platform, and I have always tried so hard to remain unbiased in every single one of my reviews. And make them fun and entertaining. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed whatever this was, and I have a bunch of cool videos coming really soon. I love you all, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.
To this day, I still think Sonic Adventure is a really good game. The game's not perfect, but I think that the game is still probably the best translation of the classic formula into 3D we've ever seen. Sonic Adventure is also an essential game for anyone collecting Dreamcast titles, as it was a launch title for the system and an impressive display of hardware capabilities. However, as good of a console as the Dreamcast was, it ultimately could not save Sega from the hole they dug themselves in the years prior to the Dreamcast's release. For more info on that, I'd say you should be watching my previous Sonic videos. But for now, let's get to the game of today. Sonic Adventure 2, released for the Sega Dreamcast in 2001. The 10th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog, and it being the first Sonic game to brand itself as such. Although I do like to look at 3D Blast as the 5th anniversary game, as it came out in '96 and was the final Sonic game for the Genesis, his console of origin, and the first game to come out in next-generation hardware. By the time of Sonic Adventure 2's release, the Dreamcast was well beyond saving, as the PlayStation 2, the greatest game console of all time if you ask me, just released the previous holiday season with an admittedly weak launch lineup, but with a ridiculous amount of great, instantly iconic games coming out in the holiday season of 2001, such as Jak and Daxter, Devil May Cry, and Metal Gear Solid 2, and the list goes on. But if the Dreamcast was going to go out, they wanted to go out with a bang. And that's how we got Sonic Adventure 2. This is it. This is the game that currently sits as my favorite Sonic game of all time, one of my favorites of all time. 10 years worth of games and stories have led up to this one. The most action-packed, replayable Sonic game released yet. The final Sonic game to be exclusively released on the Sega console, as the Dreamcast got discontinued after this game was released. However, that's not the end of the story for Sonic Adventure 2. It was the last Sonic game for a Sega console, but it was also the first Sonic game to be released on the competing consoles, as later in 2001, history was made. Sonic debuted on Nintendo for the first time with the release of the enhanced port Sonic Adventure 2 Battle for the Nintendo GameCube, and we also saw Sonic Advance hit the Game Boy Advance for more classic side-scrolling Sonic action. Sonic Adventure 2 really was a pivotal moment in the franchise's history. I'd say even more than the first Sonic Adventure was. For many, Sonic Adventure 2 was the end of an era, but for others, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle marks the beginning of another, as a new generation of players could experience this game on their GameCubes, or just people who never owned a Sega console before could finally own a Sonic game and see what it was all about. As well as checking out the rest of the series, as the GameCube also saw the release of the Sonic Mega Collection with Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles on it, Sonic CD, and some other obscure games hit the Gems Collection. Sonic Adventure came to the GameCube with Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut, and all Sonic games going forward would be available on almost every single console, as Sega was now just a software manufacturer. And Sonic Adventure 2 is an integral part of that story, regardless of what aspect of it you're talking about. This hasn't always been my favorite Sonic game, but my story with this entry in the Sonic franchise is honestly worth diving into much later in the video. So it's now been established that Sonic Adventure 2 was not only the swan song of the Sega Dreamcast, not only did it mark the 10th anniversary of the most important gaming icon of the 90s, but it also had to impress new fans with the battle port, as well as stacking up to Sonic Adventure 1 and all the great games that came before. That's a heavy burden to carry, but the cat's out of the bag. Sonic Adventure 2 is my favorite Sonic game of all time, and we're here to see how it lived up to its potential, its namesake, and then some. This is my review of Sonic Adventure 2.
File select.
This is merely how I feel, less than any quantifiable information, but it seems to me that discussion surrounding Sonic Adventure 2 is more divisive than Adventure 1. Like, I think most people can agree that SA1 has noticeably aged. Whether you think that detracts from the overall quality is the real discussion here. With this game, it's a debate as to whether or not this game has aged poorly at all, and then if you do concede to that notion, how much does the game suffer from age? With Sonic Adventure 1, once I played the game for the video, I had a pretty solid idea of where I wanted to take the video, as I've been planning this retrospective for over a year now, so talking points and moments I wanted to execute have been set for a while. But the connecting dots is the work that needs to be done. Now, with Adventure 2, there are a couple of things pressuring me here. First, I want to do this game justice, obviously. But secondly, I feel like my perspective on this game has already been well documented. So making a video that's worth your time and enjoyable to watch is another challenge. But like always, I'm going to try my best and take it from there. So, what to say from the start? Like any good sequel, Sonic Adventure 2 is significantly streamlined from its predecessor. Sonic Adventure 1 told one story spread across 6 campaigns and a final story with 6 unique gameplay styles. In Sonic Adventure 2, everything is stacked upon the theme of duality. Here we have one story told across 2 campaigns and a final one. You look at the box art of the game on the Dreamcast, and you see blue and red in the background, Sonic and Shadow. The logo has this unique look to it that effortlessly portrays the duality theme I just mentioned, and on the box of the GameCube version we see the 2 sides of the story. In SA2, we have a hero side story with 3 gameplay styles returning from Adventure 1, and a dark side story with those same 3 gameplay styles countering the ones on the hero side. Of the 2 campaigns, I think the devs intended for you to start with the hero side story, so let's begin there. Sonic Adventure 2 sets out to make a great first impression. Adventure 1 did the same, however the clunky animation killed it, like it did many times in that game. But here, a military chopper flies over San Francisco reporting the status of the captured hedgehog aboard, which is a pretty interesting change of pace. I mean, what could that be about? We don't have time to think about that as Sonic makes his first appearance.
He's taking out everyone aboard. What's wrong? Come in. Over. freeze! What do you think you're doing? Get that hedgehog!
Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies. I'm out of here. I like running better.
Already, the amount of excitement, the animation, the quality of the voice acting has all been dramatically upped from SA1. But that brings us to the first stage, City Escape. What is no exaggeration, one of the most iconic Sonic levels next to the likes of Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1 and Chemical Plant from Sonic 2. Sonic flies down the streets of San Francisco on a makeshift snowboard, blowing past the oncoming traffic and destroying the military robots like it's nothing. It's just such an action-packed stage that changed up the scenery and challenges frequently. It introduces you to the more action-based focus of Sonic Adventure 2, with the unforgettable music cementing this level as a legendary Sonic stage, already being way better to play than most of the levels in Adventure 1. Capping it off with a chase scene that puts the whale from Sonic Adventure 1 to shame as the military sends a giant truck to chase Sonic. This part here has evolved from the chase in Emerald Coast, as that was a pure visual spectacle, but in SA2 you do actually have to avoid the truck, which is an easy enough task to accomplish. But there are also these trick ramps you can jump off of that were introduced right at the beginning of the stage. But now you have to time it carefully where you jump off of them while facing the camera. It's impossible to not feel like a gaming guru when you nail both trick ramps in one run here. It's just a really satisfying stage to play, bringing us to the first boss fight, a simple mech from the military requiring some basic homing attacks, and that's all she wrote. Now, what is Sonic Adventure 2 about? Well, that begins with the most memorable cutscenes in a Sonic game, as the premise is that Sonic has been arrested by a military faction on Earth, GUN, or GUN, the Guardian Units of Nations. Sonic is being arrested on the charges of being a deserter from a gun base and for stealing a Chaos Emerald. However, this is obviously false, as the real perpetrator is the one and only ultimate life form, Shadow the Hedgehog. Making his debut in the Sonic series, and I'm not going to mince words here, Shadow is my favorite Sonic character of all time, and this game does such a great job leaving a great impression on both the players and video games as a whole. Shadow's not Sonic's first rival. I mean, in 1993 we got introduced to Metal Sonic, so I thought he did a good job as a whole lifeless Sonic thing, matching his abilities physically. But ultimately, Metal Sonic went out with little fanfare in Sonic CD and just became spin-off fodder from that point on in games like Sonic Triple Trouble, Sonic Drift 2, and Knuckles' Chaotix. Speaking of Knuckles, he became the well-known rival to Sonic when Sonic 3 came out, doing an excellent job countering the Hedgehog during the Angel Island incident, propping him up as the next most popular character behind Sonic himself. But this presented a problem. Again, Metal Sonic was basically absent from the main series at this point, getting nothing but cameos in SA1. Knuckles was an enemy to Sonic in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, specifically under the false pretense that Sonic was the villain and Eggman was his ally. Once the veil had been lifted there, Knuckles became a friend of Sonic and Tails needed to be tricked again in Triple Trouble and Sonic Adventure to fight Sonic again. So the point is, Sonic was in need of a new rival, one with more personality than ever before. Way back in my review of Devil May Cry 3, I said that Virgil had such a strong impact to how to do rivals in action-oriented video games, which I think still holds true. But this game, as one that came out a couple of years earlier, I think deserves praise in that category too. Because if you played this game in 2001, how could the rivalry between Sonic and Shadow not leave an impact? I've been talking about build-up and payoff a lot since the start of this Sonic retrospective, and this is a prime example. In the hero side story, Shadow follows the rule of 3. Here, in this insanely quotable, unforgettable scene, Shadow is just so above Sonic at this point that he is consistently standing above him throughout this entire scene. And the one time they do clash, it's to show that Shadow has powers never before seen in the series, mastering the use of Chaos Control, a time-space altering move that harnesses the power of a Chaos Emerald to warp through the air. Also, I might add, Shadow never has to touch the ground that Sonic has to walk on. Now, while this might sound like scene over analysis, it should absolutely be said that these video game cutscenes don't make themselves. Much like movies, the position of characters is often thought out. So I can't help but notice that Shadow is always above Sonic, barely saying a word as his distinct music's playing. The only words he can muster by the end is that,
My name is Shadow. I'm the world's ultimate life form. There's no time for games. Farewell.
like, Sonic's not worth his time. The next time the two meets on Prison Island, here they fight in a relatively equal playing field, ending in a draw, but if you play in the Dark Side story, Shadow still thinks Sonic isn't worth his time.
No time to hang out with the likes of you.
By the end of the game, Sonic has learned to use Chaos Control to escape from a deadly trap, and now Shadow's impressed as we get the final race between the two with life or death stakes as the final boss of both the Hero Side and Dark Side stories. These moments, they're all so quotable and iconic, and I think build-up, payoff, the rule of 3, Very simple storytelling techniques are ultimately the reason why Shadow left an impact in the hero side story alone. It's basically taking what Metal Sonic and Knuckles had accomplished and doing it even better. Shadow escapes with the Emerald, leaving Sonic to get arrested by the military, and that's the note the hero side story starts on. Making you feel all-powerful as Sonic for the first stage and boss, and to show that Shadow's character is 10 times as cool as you. And he doesn't even need the home court advantage like Knuckles had in Sonic 3. So let's move on from the story for a second and talk about something else. Stages in Sonic Adventure were divided between 3 adventure fields, perfectly sized hub worlds that logically transition the player between levels. Also just making the game feel like it had a world that was more fleshed out than the ones in the previous game could ever offer. Sonic Adventure 2 drops the adventure field aspect of the game completely in exchange for classic-style level-by-level action. Now, I don't think this change comes at the cost of the game feeling like a world, nor do I think it's a change that's particularly out of place, like certain games would be. If you play Sonic Adventure and then Sonic Adventure 2, it doesn't really require any outside sources to understand why the adventure fields are missing. As well, you could just come to the conclusion that they thought the story they were trying to tell required a bit more urgency than the leisure the adventure fields gave, and that's that. Stages are connected via a world map which kind of replay them, as opposed to the level select list from SA1. I just love this interface, highly the great art design the adventure era had going for it. This part of it's also been thought out, as while no real locations would ever look like this, obviously, but I like how City Escape and Radical Highway are moving towards one another, which is how Sonic and Shadow intersected at the start of the story. I like how Knuckles' first 3 stages, Wild Canyon, Pumpkin Hill, and Aquatic Mine, clearly show that Knuckles is moving west linearly across the map, catching up with Tails and Amy at his highway stage. If you were to ask me which of these methods of stage progression I prefer, to be honest, I don't really have one. Like, look at the Sonic Advance games, for example. Advance 1 just takes you from stage to stage via a level list, like the trial mode of SA1. Advance 2 uses the world map like Adventure 2, and Advance 3 uses a mini hub world a la Sonic Adventure 1's campaign mode. I don't really have a preference either way. Hub worlds have a greater likelihood of failing a player than stage-to-stage action ever could, I'll admit, but in principle, assuming hubs are done like SA1 or Unleashed and not like Sonic 06, then I'm fine with it. A change that does come from the lack of hub worlds is character upgrades. In SA1, you have to find upgrades like the Lightspeed Dash, Tails' Super Spin, and Jet Anklet, or Knuckles' Digging Claws in the hub worlds, and then use them in the stages. Without the adventure fields, you now just find them in stages. Like SA1, many are required like the returning and improved Lightspeed Dash, Hovering Mech, and Digging Claws, improved because of more instantaneous access to these abilities. But others are also optional, rewarding you for exploration like the Mystic Melodies for each character or Shadow's Flame Ring. So with that said, how does the Dark Side story begin? Well, we find ourselves in control of Dr. Eggman for the first time in a main series game, and let me tell you, his character has been great since the very beginning of the franchise, but this game is Eggman at his absolute best for many reasons we'll explore before the day is done. In Eggman's first stage, Iron Gate, we see him, before the hero side story even begins, sneaking into the gun base on Prison Island. To borrow a point from Sonic Dissected, here we see Sonic and Eggman, our hero and villain, with tried and true rules, being thrust into new situations. Eggman's the one breaking into a facility, tearing robots apart, and Sonic is the one on the run, on defense. Not that Eggman takes the opposition seriously, mind you. Like, that's something I always love about Eggman in this game, and any game where gun's a story point. They are constantly at war with Dr. Eggman. He's such a strong, independent army in and of himself that he just beats them every time. Like when they're looking for his hidden base in the desert, you know, the one that's covered in Eggman iconography, he's just like, well, never mind. But back on track, Eggman has raided the gun base because he discovered his grandfather, Professor Gerald Robotnik's diary, which claimed that his research was hidden away on Prison Island. That research being Project Shadow, the ultimate life form. The project was shut down by the military 50 years ago because they feared Project Shadow for whatever reason. Shadow's been sealed away for 50 years. Now that he's free, he tells Dr. Eggman to meet him with more Chaos Emeralds at the space colony Ark, Gerald's abandoned research facility. But yeah, Gerald's going to be one of the most significant Sonic characters in the next couple of games, and so is that damn diary. I mean, Gerald's diary is just Eggman's go-to. He doesn't have any plans of his own, like legit. Shadow also steals himself a Chaos Emerald from the bank before going to the Ark, and that's how he meets Sonic for the first time. Which leads me to the first of the 3 gameplay styles in Adventure 2, the Speed Stages. The 3 best playstyles in Adventure 1 were Sonic's Speed Stages, Knuckles' treasure hunting levels, and Gamma's shooting. And these are the 3 that are brought back and refined in the sequels. I said in the previous video that Sonic's gameplay in Adventure 1 was the most accurate translation of the classic gameplay ever brought into 3D. Well, I think that still holds true when specifically looking at a translation between 2D and 3D. But on the whole, I think SA2 is a complete improvement. The area I think SA1 has over SA2 the most is I think Sonic handled it a little bit better. Not by a great deal, but enough to where I noticed whenever playing SA2. Sonic turns slightly better in the last game, deals different terrain better, and overall suffers from a problem dubbed same button syndrome a lot less. where Sonic and Shadow have multiple abilities mapped to the same button, like the light speed dash, spin dash, and bounce bracelet all being on the B button. But none of these problems are severe enough for me to say that this gets in the way of the play experience. My taste in video games is generally towards skill-oriented action, and I'm a glutton for punishment, still working on those DMC2S ranks. The Speed gameplay gets the same amount of stages it did in SA1, 10. City Escape, Metal Harbor, Green Forest, Pyramid Cave, Crazy Gadget, Final Rush, Radical Highway, White Jungle, Sky Rail, and Final Chase. Each one of these stages has some kind of explosive set-piece memorable moment to speak of, oftentimes not being automated either. I already talked about how great it was to tear through the streets of City Escape, but it's just as much fun to shred down the Golden Gate Bridge as Shadow and Radical Highway, race through a military base with enemies after you while you try to catch a rocket under a time limit in Metal Harbor, blasting towards these timed doors in Pyramid Cave, or going at warp speed on the grind rails of Final Rush and Final Chase, which is the newest mechanic out of the Sonic gameplay. Sonic and Shadow have the ability to grind down rails and jump between them. When it works, it's some of the best spectacle the series has seen yet, but it can be a bit janky. Switching between rails often feels like a crapshoot, as you might overshoot the jump and die, especially at high speeds. The gameplay itself between Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Adventure 2 is fairly consistent, so you might be wondering why I consider SA1 to be the most direct translation of 2D Sonic to 3D, and not SA2. And that's actually solely because SA2 level design just does not have the same focus as the classic games or SA1. And I don't mean focus in like a good or bad design kind of way, I mean like actual what we're trying to accomplish kind of way. In each of those games, speeding through levels was a highlight and a mark of good playing skills. But in SA2, since we now have a dedicated speed playstyle, the level design is specifically tailored towards making that the overall focus. As a result, the levels are far more linear than the games that preceded this one. So spin dash jumping up to higher areas in Sonic Adventure 1 or Sonic 3 and Knuckles is not as much of a thing in this game. But this does not present a problem. First, some of the stages actually can be a bit more open-ended like Green Forest or Final Rush. But more importantly, I think the levels themselves don't suffer from linearity because of their focus on stylish tricks and gameplay. Sonic Adventure 2 is not the kind of game where you don't have to play. It's a game requiring you getting those trick ramps, being as fast as you possibly can to succeed, which in my opinion is almost infinitely replayable. City Escape is a fantastic stage. It's nearly a straight line from start to finish. However, I can't say I get tired of playing it because every run I try to get max points in trick ramps, try to get that best time, and so on. One time I was playing Radical Highway and I decided to jump on top of this loop instead of running through it, and I see this spring here that gives you access to the top of the bridge much easier for that epic grinding moment. It's just great. So that's my take on the speed-based gameplay, but I think it's more important to talk about the new character in depth. Shadow the Hedgehog. I already said a lot of great things about Shadow's introduction, but what else do I like about him? Shadow, in the hero side story, is a great rival. But this is a game where said rival character is also playable, assuming you count Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles separately in this example. Shadow's character has a lot going on in the dark side story, as early on we find out that he's a man on a mission. 50 years ago, when Gunn shut down Professor Gerald's research in the space colony Ark, one of the casualties was Shadow's best friend and Gerald's granddaughter, Maria. She saved Shadow from the Ark in her last moments, and he since promised to get revenge on the humans for what they've done. Point is, Shadow is the villain because he cares so much for the people he considers his friends, and that he'd go to those lengths for them. As Shadow and Eggman plan to use a secret weapon installed in the Ark called the Eclipse Cannon, powered by the Chaos Emeralds to destroy the Earth if they don't surrender to the Eggman Empire. Although Shadow has the true motive of getting revenge for Maria. While Shadow wishes he was a heartless bastard, he still isn't. Like when the other new character, Rouge the Bat, gets trapped with the Chaos Emeralds, he goes back to save her, rationalizing it to himself that he did it for the sake of the Chaos Emeralds.
I'm Shadow the Hedgehog, the one and only ultimate life form. Looks like Batgirl has failed her end of the deal. I really could care less about her. It's the Chaos Emeralds I have to save.
Seriously, there are a lot of assumptions made about the character of Shadow that are just not true. He doesn't really think of himself as better than others to a fault, proven by how Sonic is able to win his respect before the story is over, or this part between Shadow and Rouge towards the end of the Dark Side story.
If you want to live, leave the Chaos Emeralds where they are. The fake emerald is good enough for you.
Do you actually believe that you're the real Shadow?
No doubt.
Even your memories might not be real, you know?
Even if my memories are not real, it's still me, Shadow. And I will fulfill my promise to Maria. It's the only thing that matters to me now.
Shadow maintains his tough persona for the sake of decreasing vulnerability, but is ultimately soft on the inside. Shadow's character also looks great as well. I like talking about the art design of these characters a lot, and Shadow is no exception. The plotline of Shadow being confused for Sonic gets a lot of flack since it is kind of a stretch, however my guess is that this is a plotline carried over from back when Shadow's design was going to be a dark reflection of Sonic in the literal sense. Making a good, unique character design is hard, which is why I love Shadow's look so much. This proto-Shadow doesn't really work for me for many reasons. And it all starts with this, the silhouette. The mark of a good character design is if they can stand out from just the silhouette. Shadow's early design looks so similar to the Sonic we already have that he would not hold up to this test. Whereas the Shadow we have in the final product looks very distinct on his own, and when put next to Sonic, he looks similar but not the same, having his own silhouette that's unique to Shadow the Hedgehog, which is what I think is worthy of unique praise. I also think this early design is too villainous, if that makes any sense. Like, Shadow is actually not the villain you think he is by the end of the story, nor was he created for any evil intentions, as the flashbacks with Shadow and Maria establish. So looking this way doesn't really match up. You could already argue that with the final Shadow design, but I think that criticism especially goes to this early one. All this talk of Maria and Gerald gets me thinking, though. The fact that humans exist on Earth alongside Sonic and friends gets a lot of heat. People say they prefer if Dr. Eggman is the only human in the world of Sonic, but to that I just say I don't really think that makes any sense. Going back to Sonic the Hedgehog 1, there were only two characters, Sonic and Eggman, and a bunch of cartoony-looking animals. When we got to Sonic Adventure, we have cartoony-looking animals, real animals like orcas, humans, and characters like Sonic. I think they might have benefited from having more Sonic-like characters mixed in with humans as to further establish the fact that Sonic and friends are not out of place amongst humans, but I really don't care about this aspect of it at all. Eggman is a human, and Eggman would need to have a family to exist, so yeah, Professor Gerald is his grandfather and Maria is his cousin. There was never an intention in the old games for Sonic to be a world without humans. That is merely the interpretation that some fans have, but it's just that. We don't really need to get into the logistics of the two worlds explanation of Sonic today, but my point is just that Eggman proves humans exist in Sonic, and then you might say, but he's a cartoony-looking human. But then I say that humans vary a lot in the actual Sonic games, as the humans in SA1 have more of an anime look to them. The ones in Sonic Unleashed feel more Pixar-like, and then the ones in SA2, Shadow the Hedgehog, and Sonic 06 feel more realistic. There's no consistent rule to point to, but as far as rules are concerned, there exists none that say Adventure 1 invented human beings in Sonic games. Does it feel silly to have Sonic feel like, don't worry, Mr. President, just leave it to us? Maybe it does, but that does not discredit what I'm saying. Sly Cooper is a world of all cartoon characters, well, except this, and this, and this, and this, all of which were species that have anthro counterparts in the games, I might add. Now trying to explain that is the real headache. Point is, it really isn't that big of a deal. In Adventure 2, there is a theory out there that the human involvement is all part of a cover-up conspiracy as Shadow escaped the base and Sonic is arrested for this, and the President seemingly allows their spy to aid Shadow and Eggman in blowing up Prison Island. To that I just say, there is no evidence to say that that's not true, but I don't think that's the intention. There were just a few holes left in the story by the writers, and I think that's a theory that fills them in. Like, I don't either subscribe nor not subscribe to any theory explaining it, I just review the story as it is. But speaking of the spy, that's the other new character, Rouge the Bat. Introduced to us in a scuffle with Knuckles the Echidna over the Master Emerald that results in it shattering as they both look for the pieces. I really like Rouge's character. She's never been one of my favorite Sonic characters, but as the first major female character in the game cast since Amy, I think they did a good job making her feel unique with her mysterious allegiance throughout the Dark Side story, and her physical abilities that are on par with Knuckles, going head-to-head with him in a way no other characters besides Sonic have done before. I mentioned they make her look distinct from Amy, which is another good design choice, as at first, I think the concept art actually looks a little too similar to Amy with the haircut, but in the final version they really pulled this off. Creating two new characters that challenge old characters in brand new ways, whether they be physically or just personality clashes that are new or plainly entertaining to watch. The two characters have an interesting dynamic together, fitting in great with the cast we already have, both becoming mainstays in their own right. In their stages, Knuckles and Rouge must search for 3 pieces of the Master Emerald and occasionally search for something else, like the keys in Egg Quarters and Death Chamber, as well as the Chaos Emeralds and Security Hall. There is debate as to whether Sonic's gameplay in SA1 is better than Sonic and Shadow in SA2, but I really don't think that Knuckles' gameplay in Adventure 1 comes close to the quality of the treasure hunting stages in Adventure 2. In the last game, Knuckles was just plopped into Sonic stages, which just so happened to work out for the levels, but it was ultimately a style that didn't have much depth. It just looked really good compared to Tails, Amy, and Big. Here, the stages we get with Knuckles and Rouge, Wild Canyon, Pumpkin Hill, Aquatic Mine, Death Chamber, Meteor Herd, Dry Lagoon, Egg Quarters, Security Hall, and Mad Space are built from the ground up to accommodate for exploration. Being these big open spaces you can take advantage of their flying climbing in. Knuckles and Rouge control excellently, have great combat abilities, and so they're characters that are fundamentally fun to use. I just love dive bombing in the air at them and then resuming the glide. It's great. What complexity was in SA1's treasure hunting stages was bogged down by the hint system, where Tikal will just take you to wherever the emerald piece you're looking for was, calling it a day. In Adventure 2, there are two changes that aid in the difficulty increase from the last game. One, the radar for the emeralds has gone from showing all three pieces at once to showing one at a time. This is admittedly an artificial change made to make these stages longer, but when thinking about whether or not this is a significant problem, my conclusion is no. With the exception of Egg Quarters and Death Chamber, and I think Egg Quarters is a fine stage, but both suffer from being a series of corridors which take away from the most fun part of the style in this game, thus creating a significant amount of backtracking when working with the emerald radar we have. But the more open stages, it really doesn't create an issue for me, as the odds of having to cover the same ground again and again is pretty low from where I'm sitting. If you do have trouble, this is where the hints return, but this time requiring more effort from you, as instead of just telling you where to go, it's an actual hint. You get 3 hints per emerald, with the first one being vague, the second being more direct, and the third being more obvious. The typical argument against this is that using hints decreases your rank, which is not quite accurate. The most important thing to getting a high score on these stages is the time it takes you to do it, which yes, rewards repeat playthroughs, which I can get back to later. Using hints to find an emerald piece will net you 1,500 points as opposed to the 2,000 you would have gotten without it, but again, with speed you can get away with using like 4 or 5 hints in a stage and still getting an A. Overall, I'm impressed that the devs were able to program in so many different locations for these emerald pieces and design 3 hints for each one. It's a very well thought out system that, despite having shortcomings in stages like Death Chamber or Mad Space, which is less the fault of the gameplay style and more the clunky space mechanics. But my point is, I think if given another attempt, this gameplay could really reach new heights. Like all Sonic games, more devs tend to lead to completely fine-tuning stages that make all levels optimized for exploration, so no Death Chambers, needless to say. I tried playing the game with a hack that enabled all 3 emerald shards to be traced at once, and like I suspected, my experience didn't really get much easier because the emerald shards are never placed close together enough for missing one by accident to be a common occurrence. So I've been giving a lot of praise to the story of Sonic Adventure 2, and in the first Adventure game I did the same, but it came with the obvious follow-up point that Sonic Adventure 1's story was a love it or hate it, purely depended upon how willing you were to look past the cutscenes. Here in SA2, I really don't feel like that's a factor anymore. Yeah, I think the cutscenes are great in this game. A fantastic improvement from the last game, which just used animation from gameplay for cutscenes. I don't think the animation in SA2 is perfect by any means, as it oftentimes looks like there's a really incompetent puppeteer controlling the characters from beyond the boundaries of the scene. But when it comes to the fundamentals of making a good cutscene, SA2 gets this right in a way SA1 could never dream of. Like I highlighted in Shadow's introduction, this game has real cinematography that looks like a lot of thought got put into it. With all these animation details that couldn't be done in the last game, like right before the final boss of both campaigns, Shadow's in disbelief over how Sonic used Chaos Control and Sonic gives a cocky eyebrow raise. Or how Shadow just has this douchey grin on his face and looking down upon Sonic in their first cutscene. Eggman actually animates, is a funny thing I have to compliment, but seriously he looked awful in the last game. Characters can convincingly enough display emotions and change emotions in a way they could not in the last game, like the cutscenes between Knuckles and Rouge. And now, you could say that SA2 doesn't look as good as other 2001 games, but again, I think it's worth mentioning that this game has some of the most plot a platformer had seen up to this point in gaming. So I'm impressed that they pulled it off as much as they did, when the superior animation in Jak and Daxter is telling a much simpler story at the end of the day. Complementing these cutscenes I love is unforgettable voice acting. If you told me that Sonic Adventure 1 had bad acting, I wouldn't entirely agree, but I'm not going to die on that hill either. In Sonic Adventure 2, I think the voice acting in this game really gets the job done. Now, there are some obvious exceptions that the internet loves to point out.
Oh no! Don't touch that lever!
But the only character I think is consistently bad is Tails, voiced by Connor Bringus, the brother of Corey Bringus, who voiced Tails in Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Shuffle. But he hit puberty, so they just cast his younger brother instead. And he just sounds like he's reading off the script the whole time. Which is actually kind of an improvement over how annoying I thought Tails was in SA1, I guess. But this time, I think Ryan Drummond has the perfect cadence as Sonic, with these being the highest stakes the character has ever seen. I think Drummond played the more serious moments really well, in addition to the Sonic charm we all know and love. Scott Dreyer is Knuckles, and he's the best voice the character has ever had. An aspect of Knuckles that got lost along the way was his laid-back nature. Knuckles is supposed to be a calm and soft-spoken character who has a short temper at times, and this guy just does it right. No awkward line reads or anything like that. Lonnie Manella, the voice director of the series since Adventure 1, plays Rouge, doing a good job. Like, as a kid, I got used to the Sonic X era Rouge, and this doesn't really sound like that, but it is still good. And I love David Humphrey as Shadow. In the games he played Shadow, I think he really got the fact that Shadow's standoffish nature is an act, and that he's really a softie on the inside. Which is what I think the most important aspect of Shadow is above all else. The voice acting is helped by one of the most memorable scripts in the history of Sonic. Ask any fan, I feel like they could quote a lot of these cutscenes, and I don't think it's because it's lol so bad like you could say about SA1. I mean, these cutscenes just left such an impact on the player base that it's hard not to remember it all starts with this from Shadow, or and then the world could be yours. It's just unforgettable. Much improved cutscenes, voice acting, and scripting is to thank for that. And then you have the soundtrack, and it's just fantastic. Similar to Sonic Adventure 1, it's not my favorite Sonic OST, but it's certainly one of them. I think SA1 wins out from pure genre variety, but this soundtrack does the thing the whole game excels at. Character. Like the stages, the menus, the logos, the box arts, this game is all about character. The soundtrack in Sonic Adventure 2 has a fondness of the guitar above all other instruments. What I appreciate is that each character's music gets a slight twist to suit their style, like Sonic having this fast-paced action. Tails getting these tracks with a slower pace than Sonic's, but still providing an upbeat tune. Knuckles diving in on his rap style from SA1 and making a new song for each of his stages.
I ain't gonna let it get to me, I'm just gonna creep. Down the pumpkin hill, I got to find my little speed. I know that it's here, I can sense it in my feet. The great emerald's power allows me to feel. I can't.
Shadow getting these techno tracks that highlight the artificial nature of the character. Eggman's music being similar to Tails with a more punchy bass. And Rouge hitting these jazzier tunes to complement her stages as well. The soundtrack of the whole game is incredibly memorable and has become an iconic part of the Sonic fandom, and I don't think there's a single slouch in the OST, which includes the vocal theme collection. Like SA1, all 6 characters got a vocal theme in addition to the main theme that the game already has. For the hero side story, the vocal themes from SA1, It Doesn't Matter, Believe in Myself, and Unknown from ME all get a remix that goes in line with the style of music that each of these characters' stages have. I prefer the Adventure 1 mixes of all these songs, but I do love the new ones anyway. For the Dark Side story, we get 3 new vocals. Throw It All Away for Shadow, EGGMAN for Dr. Eggman, and Fly in the Freedom for Rouge. When it comes to the SA2 vocal collection, the Dark Side is my preferred themes over the hero side in all categories, instruments, lyrics, and performance. This is a game all about the duality angle, like I've said, and the Dark Side themes do a great job countering the ones from the hero side. Like, if Tails' theme is about confidence and the sense of building ourselves up, well, Eggman's is a bit different. Special mention to Shadow's theme. I used to not be into this one, but now it's probably my favorite of the bunch, as the instrumentals do an excellent job when it comes to portraying both the artificial life aspect of Shadow and the tragic backstory, becoming an iconic part of the cutscene that was used in. And then the lyrics also show the personality traits of Shadow I talked about earlier, like the tough guy attitude and the inner conflict. We've still yet to address the final two characters of the playable roster, Tails and Dr. Eggman. It's really cool to see Tails in the role he is in this game. After all, his arc in the first adventure game was realizing he could be a lot more than what he was as the sidekick, and now he's the one doing a lot of the heavy lifting in Adventure 2 with the tech and the plans. Going head-to-head with Dr. Eggman on the mechanical level, something thought impossible for him before the end of the previous game. Like I said earlier, SA2 is the best Eggman we've ever gotten, which leads to the big question, is Sonic Adventure 2 too dark? It's often said, but I don't think so. A story having world-ending stakes and the characters caring to make sure it stopped is not too dark in my opinion. Now, is the story too serious? To that, I also don't think so. SA2 has a great balance of all story elements. When things get tough, the game doesn't shy away from the fact that it can also be pretty funny too. Like, Eggman has always had a comedic angle to him, and this game's no different, doing it the best, I think. One of my favorite examples is the sequence of events when the heroes raid the Pyramid Base. Eggman's all excited because he has a warm welcome for them. If you watch the character recaps, Eggman at this moment says, "I was waiting for Sonic at my hidden base to show my awesome robot." It's one of the largest Eggman mechs yet, to where even Sonic is surprised. But in the Dark Side story, Sonic just busts it in one hit, and Eggman goes, "Ah, what a piece of junk!" The robot then turns on Eggman, he's like, "No!" Showing your villain act like a goober is a tough act of balance. It can kill any legitimacy the character could have had, like Sly 4. There, I said it. However, it's Dr. Eggman's evil ambitions that released Shadow. It was him that used the power of the Eclipse Cannon to destroy half the moon as a warning shot for Earth, putting the heroes in these difficult positions. And it was him who was serious about all of his plans in Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic CD, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and Adventure 1, and he just got stopped. He will take over the world and build the Eggman Empire if he's not interfered with. He also just happens to be a guy who likes to decorate his base in his own image and is funny when he's mad. Point is, I think SA2 is the kind of game that keeps your attention with its good cutscenes, chuckle-worthy moments, but also some suspenseful ones that fit in perfectly. So how do Tails and Eggman play? Well, they take the formula from E102 Gamma and SA1 and make it 100 times better. With Knuckles and Rouge, while I'm not bothered by the SA2 Emerald Radar, I can imagine and relate to it being a big problem for people. While you could say that Gamma controlled better, I don't find that to be a difference that's noticeable. And even at that, these levels are just incomparable. The stages we get for these two, Prison Lane, Mission Street, Hidden Base, Eternal Engine, Iron Gate, Sand Ocean, Lost Colony, Weapons Bed, and Cosmic Wall, have everything